Hi, everyone, and welcome to our RELEX Talks, our monthly live stream on LinkedIn where we discuss the latest and most interesting topics touching on supply chain, retail, CPGs, and more. We're live on the second Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m. sharp Eastern. Make sure to join us next month as well. You can follow RELEX Solutions on LinkedIn to keep up to date with the latest developments. I'm your host, Casey McSherry, and today we're covering demand sensing. With me today is Carrie Moran from Cap Gemini Invent, and from my RELEX colleague, Maddurha, joining us again. Carrie, Maddurha, welcome. Would you start us off with some introductions, Carrie?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm a managing consultant at Cap Gemini Invent. Prior to working at Cap Gemini and being a consultant, I've been a part of the retail industry for over 20 years. So I've led leadership roles in planning and merchandising for companies such as ASOS and Boohoo. So I guess you'd say I've had first experience of forecasting in the industry.
Awesome. Maddurha, would you give us a little bit about yourself too?
Sure. I'm Maddurha. I'm Group Vice President of Industry Strategy for Consumer Packaged Goods and Manufacturing at RELEX. And prior to joining RELEX, I spent 25 years in supply chain planning, technology, and leadership roles across various companies, both crisscrossing both product and go-to-market.
Amazing. Yeah, we've got some good guests with us here today, and we're going to be covering demand sensing. So what is demand sensing?
So maybe I'll take that on. Demand sensing is an aspect of overall demand planning process in companies. It's about any business has to make a forecast, right, for the products that they sell. So really understanding, being tuned into external signals, whether it is point of sale, whether it is weather patterns, demographic shifts, events, sporting events and things like that, and capturing those and making sure that you run advanced algorithms to figure out how it changes and how these events and how these external factors and internal factors shape your demand and adjust your forecast. And do that on a short-term basis, like it could be today, tomorrow, day after. It could be over a longer period of horizon as well, going into weeks and months too.
Yeah, interesting. And so in what ways demand sensing new, and how does this contrast with traditional ways of forecasting?
Sure. If you look at traditional ways of forecasting, you're talking about looking at your 3 years history and then hoping and praying that the history. Demand sensing is more about not just using your history, but also looking at recent indicators. So, for example, if you know that there is a storm coming, you know that the sales of your batteries and flashlights and things like that will go up, or bottled water for that matter. So being able to bring in this external intelligence as well, that's how it is fundamentally different. And also the other difference is that traditionally you rely heavily on traditional statistical techniques, whereas when you bring in demand sensing, you're looking into more of AI and advanced algorithms as well that play a role in.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess essentially this is ultimately where my background has come from. So I've always pretty much worked in a very traditional forecasting methodology way. So ultimately within retail forecasting, it's heavily relied on just historical data. And that essentially forms the shape of how you would then forward forecast. And although that's been seen for a very long time to be a really solid way of planning, it becomes outdated so quickly. And obviously, if you think about emerging trends, it's so hard to just forecast off this kind of static base. So ultimately, that now has moved, and essentially that demand sensing is offering you all of these wider source, rich points of data. So social media, and as Maddurha said, weather, and it incorporates all of this rich data. And ultimately, it can now get to such a granular level, down to, for example, down to the SKU level, down to the source, to the store level. And ultimately, that's not what, a human can kind of get to. It also puts up bias as well. So there's so many, different contrasts against the traditional way. And it's really exciting.
And Carrie, can you tell us about how customers are applying demand sensing?
Yeah, I mean, so what we're seeing is we're supporting customers because ultimately we want to ensure that they're operating their business as efficiently as they can and try and allow them to gain competitive advantage. And ultimately, it stems from your forecast. So when you become closer and more reactive to your demand forecast, you can ultimately then manage your stock inventory in a much more seamless way. And ultimately, better management of inventory means better cash flow and less wastage. So it really is a win-win. And so ultimately, that is what our customers are kind of coming to us for when they're looking at demand sensing.
And are there certain types of products or industry verticals where demand sensing matters more?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm going to kind of lean on some examples that I've seen in my lifetime. So, you'll see different products with fluctuating demand patterns. So there's the likes of sort of seasonal products, and then you'll have them. The benefits then obviously of looking at seasonal is that, you've got to stay true to that kind of life cycle, and it's really key to understand it. You've then got shorter life cycle products, so perishable products. So they're going to need really accurate and timely forecasts. And then to the other extreme, there are products that require real high accuracy when you're talking about high value items. So the key here is that you need to get really precise with those volumes, because what you don't want to be doing is having stock outs or then overstocking. So there's real differentiation with different types of products and how you need to plan and forecast for that. And then I think you mentioned from industry, again, coming from my background of retail, I know how important it is to manage that inventory, and it needs to be effective and ensure that you're allocating it officially out to the stores. But from my experience, retailers aren't really kind of attuned into this kind of technology as yet. So where we're actually seeing more opportunity and more industries kind of coming in on this focus is sort of within consumer products or manufacturing and pharmaceuticals. And again, a lot of this, for example, in manufacturing is around improving their production planning and ultimately reducing their lead times and wastage.
Yeah, very valuable. And given demand sensing is AI-based, how can we help users gain trust in the forecast recommendations? And how can they develop trust in machine recommendations? Madhav, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I speak from the vantage point of, actually, before I get into this, I just want to add one more thing to Kerry's comment earlier.
Yeah.
Is a couple of things. One is from a CPG standpoint, you have you look at beverages, for example. Even a 1 degree raise in temperature during summertime could have a significant implication in terms of how the demand pattern shifts, right? I've done studies and engagements where it's like 2 degrees raise in summertime could spike the demand by 50%, right? So especially in peak summertime. So being able to tap into those signals is extremely important. And what we have seen at RELEX is obviously food and beverage, consumer packaged goods, to Kerry's point, is a very interesting industry vertical to look into. In terms of your ask about, how can, given that it's the AI driven system, how can users build faith and trust into it? There are multiple aspects to it. One is, first of all, when you deploy the technology, typical of a lot of the machine learning technologies, by the way, is you look at a test data set as well as the training data set, right? So first you train them with using certain amount of data, and then you test it against another historical sample that you have stored, so that you can compare how your forecast is comparing to the actuals, right? So that is one way. Then the second thing is when companies roll out this, solutions, they don't have to do it like, for the entire enterprise in one go, right? You can selectively pick certain product groups, you can selectively pick certain channels, certain geographies, and things like that, and be able to, you know, surgically target certain categories and then expand from there. So that's another way, right? So you're not rolling out like a big bang. Then the third thing is explainability of AI. There is so much being talked about right
Yeah.
now about when it comes to AI explainability. Is AI a black box? Can the results be trusted? Can the results be explained? Something we have done at Relax is that anytime, let's take demand sensing and forecasting as an example, right? Anytime we make a forecast recommendation, we break it down into saying that this is the baseline, this is the
Mhm.
seasonality, this is the trend. Oh, by the way, this much is coming from weather patterns, this much is coming from a promotion that you're running or your retail partner is running, and so on and so forth. When you break it down, me as a user can look at those results and say, that
Yeah.
makes sense. So those are some ways in which one can build trust.
I was going to say, and that is key, really, coming again from a merchandising planning background, you're going to use the methodology that you've learned for so long, but I need to believe and trust that the data is telling me what I think it's telling me. So ultimately, if you can really break that down and understand which points this is coming from, it's really going to allow the person, the planner, the business to really embed this technology into their organization.
Absolutely. And so when it does work well, what are some of the benefits of demand sensing and what can companies expect? Carrie, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of probably listed, some of those benefits already. Ultimately, you've got all of this rich data that we're really starting to utilize. And ultimately, that's improving your forecast accuracy. And you're leveraging that real-time data and all the advanced analytics that come in hand to that. And as I've kind of alluded to before, it ultimately enhances your inventory levels. And you're going to therefore have a much more streamlined, much more efficient supply chain. And what that then gives the organization is it gives the organization's ability to allow their planners more time to become more strategic thinkers, because you're giving them better data and they're going to make much more commercial and more enhanced decisions about their ranges. So ultimately, let the data be driven and give those enhanced decisions to the user to make the right sound choices.
Mm-hmm. And so when you look through the lens of a customer, what roles does Cap Gemini, for example, play?
So the key here really is to kind of ultimately recognize that this is a really solid piece of tech and AI that we have. But what we do at Cap is ultimately we're essentially, we bring the business processes together. So for me, it's about bringing us together. So it's not just about a technology upgrade. This technology, it impacts people and their workflows. So you really need to integrate a RELEX solution into your organization, and it needs to be a seamless transition. And that's where Cap comes in. Ultimately, we play that part of bringing the two together. And ultimately, it is an organizational change and it needs careful planning and implementation. And again, this is where you're going to have the journey of change and the journey of making sure that people trust your data and your systems.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Madhav, when looking through the lens of a customer, how does RELEX play into that?
Yeah, at the heart of it, we are a technology provider, right? Our expertise is in building these AI-powered systems, but build those in a manner that is sustainable and scalable. And in fact, if you look at the heritage of Relax and where we came from the world of retail. So we understand what it means to be processing data at scale, right? When you apply technologies like demand sensing, you're looking at very granular information. You're looking at information that is available at a daily and sometimes sub-daily. You're looking at information like weather by location and so on and so forth. So being able to process that data at scale and bring the technology to do that is one. The second thing is the world around us is changing too fast. Okay, why is demand sensing important, right? Because you have to tap into this external changes that are happening beyond your enterprise. So being able to cope up, oftentimes one of the limitations of packaged applications is it's like pouring concrete, right? When you go live, and then it's rigid, it doesn't flex when your business changes. So one of the advantages we bring is without having to write code, for the business users and business super users to be able to go in and be able to configure the system is a differentiation we bring to bear above and beyond the AI powered technologies and the user experience associated with that. Now, when I look at, just to supplement what Kerry said, almost think about Cap and Relax as like the yin and yang, right? That we bring to the very complementary set of offers where we bring the technology, we bring the competence around deploying these AI-based technologies in a scalable, sustainable manner. However, a transformation requires multiple things. It requires organizational alignment. It requires process definition. It requires change management, user education, and so on. So that's where Cap Gemini has got, decades and decades and years of experience. So that's how these two come together.
I think on this point, it is probably really important to kind of discuss about change. And ultimately, the key around change, as we've spoken about, was one of the key themes that we see at CAP is definitely around the trust issue of data and systems. But this is where we kind of come in. And ultimately, it's really crucial when you're bringing in a piece of tech of this size and scale that the organization and everybody a part of the project are aligned strategically onto the same vision from the offset, and ultimately you bring that journey forward. And when I mean bringing that journey forward in the business therefore then need to take on that journey and move that forward and essentially embed this into their organization. And us two organizations can't do that on our own. We need to be living and breathing in that organization and allow the organization to take that change on. And so some other strategies that we've seen at CAP also that are really key in kind of embedding this change is around ensuring you've got the right stakeholders and making sure they're actually a part of the project and that they're the right people to make the right decisions that aligns to the vision. Other things are making sure you've got solid data standards. So ultimately, that is key. If your data in the first instance isn't clean or it hasn't got that strong governance, then ultimately you're going to fall down. But ultimately, that's where we're there to kind of help and support you as well. And then, as we mentioned, training and comms, that's really key in any kind of form of change management that we do. So again, we can help and support on that. And finally, what is also important is when you've got sort of these kind of programs in place is making sure you've got on those key milestones, any sort of opportunity to ensure that you're capturing sort of continuous improvements along the way so that you can kind of keep reflecting on that and keep improving on the process and the project. So they're just some sort of strategies that we see at CAP and kind of what helps us kind of ensure that we're embedding change effectively into an organization.
I think there is just maybe one additional comment I want to make there is,
Please.
I think Kerry covered a lot of the essential ingredients, and one of the things is executive sponsorship at the top.
Absolutely.
The tone has to be set at the top.
Yeah.
And making sure that constantly, sometimes what ends up happening is you have an executive very engaged in making purchasing decisions and, whether it is software selection, engaging with a partner, so on and so forth. But when the time, it gets down into project planning and starting to deliver and implement the solution, oftentimes, I see organizations make the mistake of the executive sponsor kind of pulls back. But I think it is extremely important to translate that vision at the time of making a decision on digital transformation, making sure that it is getting built into the process and the day-to-day workflows. It is very important to maintain that sponsorship all through the journey, the transformation journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, we would all love a perfect project where the data is perfect, perfect stakeholders. But something that I've seen a lot in, the sales cycle is what do we do when the data is bad or there's gaps in the data, which I think is a big problem for enterprise retailers over the last 5, 6 years. Yeah, just wondering if you guys had any thoughts on how we support when there are issues with the data.
Sure. You want me to answer that first, and
Yeah,
then you
please.
feel free to chime in. So, I'm yet to meet a prospect or a customer when I walk in and say, "How is your data?" I don't have anybody saying that my data is 100% accurate. Right?
If only.
Doesn't happen. I'm still waiting for the day, 25 years in. But my point is that your data is never perfect. I think it's important to acknowledge that at the beginning of a transformation journey. That said, the degree to which the data quality, how trustworthy the data is, kind of
Mhm.
varies from organization to organization. So, uh, what I always recommend is, yes, have a discipline around your data strategy, making
Mhm.
sure that it's a continuous improvement effort when it comes to data. However, let that not stall you. Oftentimes organizations make the mistake of, okay, let me get my data perfect and then I'll think about
Yeah.
transformation. The challenge is, because of all the reasons Kerry was mentioning around the value proposition, you're leaving money on the table by doing that, right?
Mhm.
By deferring that decision. So it's important to approach these with a sense of urgency. But also, one of the byproducts of a digital transformation effort, especially engaging AI powered solutions, is that two things happen. One is the imperfections in your data get surfaced, right? Some of the hidden imperfections in the data become more visible as you start, putting in these new generation systems where you can actually see and visualize your data and the patterns within. You can spot challenges with the data quality right there. Then the
Mhm.
Mhm.
second thing is, from a Relex standpoint, what we do is, as part of our deployments, our algorithms also have mechanisms to correct the data, cleanse the data, right? So that, to a degree, it happens in an automated manner too. So let the data quality concerns not stall your transformation efforts. I want to make here. Okay, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, again, coming from that traditional sense, back, good 10, 15 years ago, the data set was so much more limited. And ultimately, when it was limited, people kind of, as I said, based their data on that historical trend. Now, what's kind of happened is, if there's so many data sources now, and if anything, when they're not connected and they are disjointed, it's actually become much more confusing for a planner to know what to plan and trade off of, and so you need to be careful. So I guess whilst you're in that sort of inroad, sometimes it's best to keep it basic, because at least you understand that the data is making sense, and it's you're attuned to it. But the more data you add in, ultimately, this is when you have to accept that, we are humans, and we can't really, consume all of this rich data. And that's when you kind of need to look at technology and look at how you're, managing your data ultimately, to then allow us to bring in a tech organization like RELEX to ultimately plug this in and work with Cap to kind of embed it into your system. And they're the kind of steps I think you need to take to kind of get you moving forward in the right way to start working in demand sensing.
Yeah, actually, there's one more thought that triggered the comment you are making, Kerry, is around the data is never static, right? It's getting more dynamic, it's getting more
Mm-hmm.
diverse as well. I may
Yeah.
actually today say that these are all the external data elements that I want to bring in, and then you're already running the system and running your process and all that, and suddenly you might say, I think how people are going about, to retail stores, to restaurants, or to ports and so on, is having an implication on my demand patterns. I want to bring in, let's say, Google mobility indices data. Okay. So that is a different external data stream that now you need to ingest and make sure that you're factoring that into your forecasting process. So, just being open-minded when it comes to the data strategy, that acknowledging that even my data and the sources of data are not going to be static, they're going to continuously evolve. So it is important to also select a system, select the technology to make sure that you're able to ingest a variety of elements of data when you're doing demand sensing and demand planning.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing to add is that, ultimately, planners in any organization that are using this technology, what we try to apply is ultimately at CAP is, there might be this 80-20% rule where you are still going to want to tinker and understand, and slightly tweak your forecastings. But generally we find that, ultimately demand sensing, it really can be touchless. You've just got to try and trust the system, and the more that you get used to its accuracy and that you allow it to do what it needs to do, then over time people will trust it. But again, that's the journey that you take on, and it takes time to embed these systems. There's no doubt. But just think about what strategic positions these planners can now play with that additional time and opportunities. Like, is it that they start to invest in looking more into new product innovations? It frees that time for you to be able to kind of consider other options, other ranges, and other ways to kind of improve your organization.
Yeah, building trust over time is definitely very key. I think people want to just be able to trust it right off the bat and not have to worry about it. But like you said, it's about understanding the source and kind of building a relationship with what's in front of you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think unless we have any questions from the audience, if anybody wants to jump in and add, I think we might be wrapping up for today.
Can I make a couple of comments?
Of course, please.
Yeah. So I think something that caught my attention is Kerry used the word touchless forecasting.
Yeah.
I just want to mention this as well. I mean, at RELEX, we worked with few hundred retailers as well as manufacturers as well in terms of actually testing out and applying 100% machine learning driven demand planning and demand forecasting and sensing technologies. What we are finding consistently is as users build trust in the system, more and more forecasts get executed in a more touchless manner. Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine, especially when you get down to the retail scale, you're getting down to the store item level, kind of a day level forecasting. You have the time to micromanage to that level of detail, right? You have to trust the system, but by providing transparency, by providing the ability for the users to test the system to their heart's content, making sure that they're building faith into that, it helped us. Recently I was talking to a Nordics-based food manufacturing company. What they're doing is 98% of their forecasts now are getting executed in a touchless manner.
Amazing.
And while they are doing that, they saw their inventory levels drop and their service levels pick up as well. I mean, that's the magic we are talking about here.
Yeah. But that's given them the time to focus on the areas that they need to focus on, and we need to utilize these opportunities in tech and free up the planners to actually trade and manage and seek out more opportunities in the organization. And this is where their skill set at the moment it's needed. So yeah, that's a great example. I think coming from a fashion background as well, and whilst I've moved into consulting, I'm not going to lie, I was very skeptical about this is the fashion space. How can you forecast in a fashion industry? And the more I start to think about it, you definitely can. Like most retailers will have like a core package of basic products that can very easily be put through this process. But until you start to open up and think about these opportunities, and start to trust, then, that's the starting part of this. So I look and hope that the industry that I've particularly come from starts to recognize that there's some massive opportunities in this kind of space. So yeah.
Yeah, we actually did have one last little question here. Aditya asked, it would be great if we could provide an example of a client implementing demand sensing for a specific product slate. How do they choose products, and were there any associated adverse effects? Interesting. Yeah, so for a specific product, we kind of talked a little bit earlier about seasonal and demand sensing there.
Yeah, we have a number of clients actually using across different types of product profiles, right? We have customers that are using it for day in and day out kind of products. When you look at beverages, for example, right, you're selling them year round. Whereas we have customers who are using them for highly seasonal products as well, right? Whereas, when it comes time for Thanksgiving, for example, the meat sales pick up significantly, right? Or Super Bowl, the sale of snacks will pick up significantly. So we've seen across the board, including even slow movers, for example. We have developed some very specific algorithmic techniques around pool models and things like that. But I always recommend start with product categories that have the highest, they have to fit one of two criteria. One is they have the highest business impact, right? They cover majority of your volumes and majority of your dollar share or euro share or whatever you're talking about, or products that are moving fast enough but are challenging to manage from a forecasting standpoint for a variety of reasons. They're highly seasonal, they're highly trendy. It could be a variety of reasons, right? So honing in on those categories and starting there and then expanding would make sense.
Totally.
Yeah, I guess it depends on business to business, what percentage of, how risk averse they really are. I guess in my example, coming from a fashion background, when I look at core product lines, so your classic white t-shirt, for example, that is something that will have a very, static shape. It will have, obviously weather will impact it, or, seasonality, different sources will kind of influence it, but ultimately that shape, I would feel relatively confident putting a line through a touchless planning process on that, because it should incorporate a much more better accuracy than I could forecast. However, if there was a fashion piece that we didn't really have any historical understanding or any kind of trend to kind of replicate it, then they're the kind of things that you want to stay close to. So it really depends, but it's knowing your range and knowing the risk averseness of your organization.
Absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we are at time today, so it's time to wrap up. Just as an overview, we covered the competitive advantage of demand sensing, talked a little bit about seemingly tiny fluctuations having a big impact on how demand manifests, the best ways to implement. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching and joining us today. Don't forget to follow RELEX Solutions on LinkedIn for our insights. And the upcoming episode on December 11th is, in fact, our last show of 2024. Don't worry if you can't catch us live. Everything is on YouTube and on our LinkedIn page. I'm your host, Casey McSherry. Joining us today, Maddurha and Kelly Moran. And thanks so much, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.